for spending your Tuesday evening with me. I had a chance to talk to a few people before to understand like what you came for, what information would be most helpful, what you want to learn. So if I don't end up covering it in my slides and my talk, please ask questions. I want this to be useful and helpful to you. And I was actually very flattered to be invited to share my story because I consider myself a work in progress still versus like reading the bio like an already successful person. I think, most mornings when I wake up, I have 3 kids. I have a commute to the city from the South Bay. I probably don't feel like a super successful person. I feel like a hot mess. That's like, did I remember my car keys, my cell phone, my stuff? So rest assured that we're all going through the same things and trying to make a life that's worth living. So I will share some turning points. That's really been the theme that I think all the other talks that have happened before is like, what were the milestones in my life where I look back and think, how did I make a decision? Was it, when I look back, was it a good decision? Was it a bad decision? I'll certainly share some mistakes I've made because I think you learn more from mistakes sometimes than the things that seem like they're going really well. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the Bay Area, so I'm a Silicon Valley native. My dad's an engineer, my mom's a teacher. They were both immigrants. They were born in China, grew up in Taiwan. So I was actually raised, I have 2 sisters. We were raised to either be doctors, lawyers, or engineers. And none of us are any of those. So, but I would still say my parents did a pretty good job raising me, and their kind of values and the things that we grew up really focusing on, learning, education, kind of surrounding ourselves with really great people, and being open to opportunities are the themes that then guided me as I made decisions. So kind of first milestone, at the risk of really showing how old I am, 1994, some people in this audience may not have been born, some may have been in kindergarten, but 1994 I had graduated from college. I had started out as a Bain associate consultant, and I was a year into it and realized I did not fit in that company. I learned a ton, but I go back to like Sesame Street where there's the which one of these is not like the other, and I was clearly in the box of like, I am not like the other people around me. And so this is probably one of the first times where like taking a risk and seeking out, in a very serendipitous way, another opportunity turned out to be a really great decision. So there was a former Bain consultant, and he had joined a company called Gymboree, and I met him through some mutual friends, and he said, look, I totally get, not being happy at Bain, so come interview with me, just see if there's an opportunity. And the idea of like leaving being a Bain associate consultant, which had been a super competitive job to get out of Stanford undergrad, was a little alarming. Also a little alarming to my parents, who were, my dad's been at IBM for his entire life. So, but I was like, okay, there's something there. So I go to interview at Gymboree, and while I'm in the waiting room in the lobby, there's an announcement that comes on, and it's like, it's snack time, everybody, it's snack time. And I was like, I think I have to work here. Because, in contrast to like packing my bags and being on a plane every week. But the most important lesson I learned there was that I had the great good fortune, and I didn't know it at the time, but now in hindsight, of working for the best boss I ever had, this guy Michael, who recruited me. And the reason he was such an amazing boss, and this is what I've learned as I've had the fortune to manage people, is he really cared about me as a human being first. And he was also somebody that I could learn from, and this is really the sort of lesson of that, both on a personal and professional level. So for me, some of my struggles at Bain were I'd look around at all these very successful people, and none of them were really, at the time, living a life that I felt like I wanted to live when I grew up. If they had kids, they rarely saw them. A lot of people weren't married. And everything was about work, and they just didn't seem to be having fun and really living. So what was different about Michael is he had 3 girls. He'd been married for a long time to his high school sweetheart, And he was just a good person. Like, our conversations and our one-on-ones were not about like, here are your objectives and here's the business goals, but instead they were about what were my goals, both personal and professional. Where did I want to go? And at the time, I said, hey, I think I want to go to business school. And most other bosses would, kind of freak out or do them. I'd seen people at Bain do this, where they would say, okay, how am I going to control the situation to get the most out of you while you're my employee? And like try to extend the time in which I have you under my clutches. And Michael, on the other hand, was like, great, that's a fabulous goal. Here's what I'm going to tell you about getting into business school, because he had gone and he sort of ran down the list of these are the things they look for. I know the admissions director, and so let's scope out your job here to really meet and exceed all of those goals, including, like, he was super upfront. He was like, getting promoted is a big deal on your application, or it was at the time. So he's like, let's make sure you have all the opportunities, and he also would check in on, my personal life, and I got engaged while I was at Gymboree, and he just cared about me as a human being, and it was such an important lesson for me, and unfortunately spoiled me for all future bosses because I had such a high bar. So that's another story of I may have been difficult to manage since then, because I'd be like, why aren't you like Michael? But for me, what it did is like I have a true north. When every time I've been in a difficult management situation or had a new employee, and like I am faced with a situation I don't know what to do, throughout my career I've asked myself, like, what would Michael do? And that actually has been super helpful for me. So, what's my advice there on seeking people out? I think the first is understand yourself. For me, it was super important to find somebody that cared as much about their personal life as their professional life. And the other is, something I've learned over time, because the Michaels of the world, they exist, but they are also rare, is ask around, ask people. If you haven't found that person that is your go-to person, that's your role model, like ask around and get introductions and ask people that you know and trust, hey, who's somebody that you think is great at X? Or who's somebody that you think I could learn from on Y? And inevitably, like good people, you'll get several references to them. And really great people you can learn from. The other thing they do is they give time back, and they truly enjoy helping other people. So I know for all of us out there, if you haven't already, you'll find your Michael, or you'll find multiple of them, but just keep looking for them if you haven't found them. So fast forward a couple years, so I got into business school thanks to Michael. To this day, I still don't know exactly what he wrote, but I got it was phone call, see, it's so retro. Phone call, not email, that I'd gotten in. And he was like the first one to be super excited for me, right? I'm like an employee that's leaving, and he threw the party, and he was super excited. So I go to business school, I graduate during the dot-com boom. There literally were companies being funded on napkins, and knew several of them. And so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I had an idea that I wanted to go into technology. And a friend of mine who I'd worked with at Bain and had gone to business school with called me and said, I bought a company in Seattle, and we are going to sell diamonds online. Do you want to move to Seattle and do this with me? And I said, sure, that sounds great. So you can imagine the panic when I told my parents that I'd graduated from business school with significant debt, that I was going to move out of the Bay Area. So my husband and I both grew up in the Bay Area. Our families were here. When we went to tell them, they actually didn't believe that we were telling them that we were moving to Seattle so I could sell diamonds online. They thought it was a joke that we were actually telling them that we were pregnant. It was like, this is a very, like, this is not you're not hearing the message. My mom was like, so when are you going to tell us about the baby? I was like, there's no baby. There are diamonds online sold from Seattle. So at the time, it was like crazy. And when I look back at that decision, it was one of the best ones I ever made, partly, again, based on the people. Mark Badon, who is the founder and CEO, was somebody that I always wanted to work with, super smart, always coming up with different, brilliant ideas. And it was a great time to take a risk and be open to learning. So while I was there, I did everything from marketing and merchandising to sitting in a vault within a vault, picking and packing and shipping diamonds during the holiday season. And some of the important lessons I learned there were to not only take risks, but be willing to be different. At the time, again, like money was flowing everywhere. Every VC had a jewelry play, a pet play, and can't even remember, online groceries early. And most of them were overly funded. And one of the things that I learned from Mark was about focus. And so he had bought a jewelry retailer and turned it into an online e-commerce play by really focusing on first himself as a customer, and then the need for guys to have a way to buy jewelry that was not a crappy experience, basically. Like most retail is pretty broken for men. And there was all this external pressure to like look at the market research and build a company that was like pink and purple and sold jewelry to women. And Mark was a person who just taught me to focus and listen to our customers even at that time, and really understand their pain points and focus on how to solve those without being swayed by the pressures of whether it was investors or whether it was analysts or whether it was just other people, you know, friends, family who were like, it's women who buy jewelry. And that kind of singular focus on like, how do I solve a customer pain point and problem has helped me throughout my career, and also thinking about businesses that I want to join. Like, are they really ones that truly understand their customer, always hold their customer front and center, and regardless of the storms around them and the flavors of the week and the month, really understand how to solve that customer problem. So I spent a couple of years there, and also kind of segue into my next learning. I had my first child at Blue Nile in 2000, and then shortly after that, my husband and I moved back to the Bay Area, where I joined eBay, where I had my daughter, so 2004. So these were my 3 kids, about 3 years spread apart. I am typically a little bit of a type A person and planner, so I'd grown up with sisters that were about 3 years apart. My husband's siblings are about 3 years apart. There's all these studies about having children 3 years apart to get ideas, so I've got my little checklist. You can have kids 3 years apart. But my lesson learned here was less about planning them 3 years apart and more about just having them. Like, having kids is not for everybody, but if you think you want to have kids, and so many of you you're young and you're early in your career, have them. Don't wait. Like, there's so many people I've talked to, and so many good friends, that it's I'm going to cross that bridge when I get promoted. I'm going to have kids in 5 years. I want to be married for 6 years before we have kids. And there's all these reasons that we can talk ourselves into for not doing it. And I would just say I have 3 wonderful reasons that sometimes are chaotic, but live at my house, that are reasons just to go for it. I had a baby at a startup. I sat pregnant picking diamonds. Like, people thought I was insane. But that may be the theme that you're hearing from, like, people think I'm crazy. But part of it was like, it was a liberating experience just to do it and figure it out, and not worry about, am I gonna make this work? Is this all gonna kind of sort itself out? I think my oldest actually was the best lesson learned in you're no longer in control, because speaking of being a planner, I had everything organized. He was supposed to be born at the end of June, beginning of July. I had my maternity plan, I had all the things worked out, and he came 3 weeks early. My doctor was on vacation. I had not written my birth plan, if anybody knows about it. It's like a little checklist. We hadn't packed anything for the hospital, and we hadn't even finished the birthing classes, which with your first, you take them. By the third, you're like, what's that stuff I'm supposed to remember? But we were taking this very seriously, and none of that had been planned. So as we're driving to the hospital, because my water broke and I'm having contractions, I'm literally answering the questions for the birth plan, written with a slightly broken pencil, which I had originally planned out in my mind that I was going to answer all the questions, type them out in triplicate, and have them, laminated, because we were going to be in a hospital and there might be, stuff going on. And my husband was like laughing at me, because he's like, so how's this going? And I was like, do not talk to me. I'm about to have your baby, and I'm trying to answer these questions as fast as I can. And so my lesson there was like, you're really not in control, and it's probably a good life lesson. And so, to have kids, the other lessons involved with my kids, there's so many. I think they've made me a better manager and better boss and just better person in general. All the things that I work on as a parent, to be patient, to be empathetic, to kind of see in people the very best that's in them and all the potential they have. When I transfer that to the people that I have the privilege of managing and working with, it's all true, right? The things I value, like being patient and really understanding who people are, seeing their potential, and being empathetic. I think those things have helped me be a better person and be a better boss, and hopefully, continue to be the best mom possible. Somebody asked me earlier about like making life decisions and when to have kids. I had my daughter at eBay. So I eBay startup is when I had my 3 kids. So I was, it's a fast growing company. I was a senior manager running a product team. And I did have that moment where it was like, I had a 2-year-old and ran my plan and my calculations like, I better start if I'm going to have number 2 and hit the window in my plan. And there's part of me that was like, how am I going to do this and get promoted and have all the things that I want to have and have set as goals. And I was stressing myself out worrying about this, literally every day at my desk. Do I think about having a baby? Do I think about getting promoted? What if I'm not focused enough on work because I'm thinking about the baby and then I don't get promoted? But what if I get promoted and then I'm pregnant? Like, are they going to keep me promoted? And I was driving myself like berserk. And I think I'm trying to remember the trigger, but all of a sudden, I think it was some people around me were probably like, hey, is everything okay? Because you're seeming a little more stressed out than you usually are. And I had a good conversation with, I called Michael up. He was now living across the country and managing a company. I'm sort of like, I am in this dilemma, right? Like, I'm trying to make this choice. I don't know which way to go. And his advice was like, why is there a choice? Like, why are you worrying about these things when you don't know if either is going to happen or both are going to happen? Like, what does the worry do? And it was a very Zen-like, kind of moment where it's like, you're right. Like, me sitting at my desk panicked about what's going to happen if either thing happens or both things happen or neither thing happens is not making anything happen and is in fact making me harder to live with and work with. So I actually took his advice, and somebody was asking about worries and prioritization, and started to just, anytime I had a worry, write it down on a sticky or a piece of paper and just put it in a drawer, put it away. Like, it acknowledges that you have the worry, but it, also puts it in its place. And it was actually super effective for me. I focused on work because I actually loved the team I was managing and I loved the stuff I was doing. And out of the blue, I actually, not even in the job I was at, because somebody moved to take on eBay Canada, my boss at the time moved me into another role and promoted me, totally unexpectedly. And then a couple months later, I was expecting my second, and he was totally excited for me. He was like, this is great, this is awesome, totally excited for you. I know you've always wanted to have more kids, and none of the things I was driving myself berserk about came true. That's not always how things work, right? But the lesson for me is I was a lot happier and I enjoyed my life a lot more without worrying about things I had no control over. And then my youngest, who just turned 6, I had him 2 months after I sold a startup. So that was a totally other exciting adventure, because eventually I left eBay, partly because of my oldest child, who one day asked me, Mommy, what do you do at work? And I happened to have a day, and it was during a tough time at eBay. I've been there 5 years. I had a day where I made a bunch of PowerPoint decks. I answered lots of emails, and I sat through a 2-hour meeting where there were 57 people in the meeting because I had enough time to count them all. And we had just gotten big. And so I got home, and he was, 5 years old, kindergarten. Mommy, what did you do at work all day? And so I tried. I was I had some meetings. I made presentations. I tried to explain that to him. And I answered a lot of emails. I sat through more meetings. And he, wide-eyed, looked at me and said, that just doesn't sound like fun. And I was like, my God, this kid is so much smarter than me, which is actually universally true about children. And so that was sort of a turning point. I was like, I like startups. I am happier at fast-growing places where I have an impact. And eBay was 10,000 people. Like, I want to matter when I show up to work, even though I have, at the time, 2 great kids. Like, I make a choice to leave them at home, so I better be super happy where I'm headed to. Otherwise, like, why am I making the choice to leave them? So, so I quit that job, and I have since been on a path of different startups, including Insider Pages, which is the one that we sold to CitySearch and ISC, SurveyMonkey, and then ended up, let's see, my last one. So in 2012, I had this awesome job, SurveyMonkey. It's a fast-growing company. I ran product and marketing, and we were doing a ton of content. It was sort of 30 people when I joined, and over 200 people when I decided, again, being slightly crazy, to leave this awesome, secure job working with great people that I adored, because there was a chance to start something, and it was kind of serendipitous. I was on the board of a startup. There was an idea being incubated there. It was different than what their core business was, and before I realized what the words coming out of my mouth, I said, I think I want to try to do this. And all of a sudden, like, some funding came together for seed financing, and I recruited a co-founder, somebody that I had worked with before, and we went to see if there was a there there. And it was, I will say, it was probably on the list of from selling diamonds to leaving eBay to all kinds of the things that I've done. It was probably pretty high on the list of ridiculously crazy things, both that I've done and been pretty scared as I did, as well as having to explain to my parents once again. But by now I've broken them in, so, and I have the 3 kids. So, so all their check boxes are checked, and so my moving from jobs and exploring new opportunities doesn't faze them anymore. But this lesson is, the path isn't always, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a work in progress, right? The path is not actually always up and to the right for most of us. And even for the people out there that it looks like it's up and to the right, you pull back the curtain, and all of us struggle with the same things of like, is this the right decision? Am I doing the best job that I can? Should I have done this? And the things that, my lessons there, so it was a seed-funded startup. We were very ambitious. A few people came specifically because of it. So it was a community-based, kind of crowdsourced designs, kids clothing, all things that I loved. And we were super ambitious. So we raised seed funding, and we were a private label, manufactured the clothing ourselves, did all the fulfillment in a place kind of 3 hours north of here that I drove to and picked, packed, and shipped in the warehouse. So good for me. I learned how to do that in my Blue Nile days, as well as built a website from scratch that had like community voting, that had an e-commerce presence, and also had a way for designers to kind of showcase their designs. So huge potential, lots of moving pieces, and back to like lessons learned, mistakes, not capitalized correctly to be an e-commerce company. So if I've learned any lesson around like starting something and what I would do differently is, I'm a very like gut person about people, about opportunities, about like, am I gonna learn something? And all those came true. What I would have done differently is really, dug in on the capitalization. Like, how do I capitalize a company that's going to have inventory? Because if you learn anything running a startup is like that cash goes fast, like before it gets transferred from the investors into your account, it is out the door. And so we found ourselves in a situation where like we were getting traction on the website. I had this great engineering team, and we had a lot of inventory. And I would have like applied the lessons of minimum viable product to physical product if I had to do it over again, and literally bought other people's stuff and surveyed on sizes and styles before we doubled down on what we did. So we took stock, my co-founder and I did, and we were right in the process of kind of getting out of the inventory business and just focusing on our platform and figuring out how much runway we would have in order to do that. And in a very serendipitous way, we were introduced to the folks at TaskRabbit. We had a lot of investors in common. They were the same technology stack as we were, and they were looking to add to the team, in particular both engineering and management. And so very quickly we were acquired as a team, really for talent. TaskRabbit does not sell kids clothing, just to clarify. Other thing I learned to do was, I now know the ins and outs of every single flash sale site. So if anybody's in e-commerce and needs to run a flash sale site, definitely come talk to me after. I have all my spreadsheets of all the things that I did. So check that off the list of life lessons learned. Be able to sell excess inventory on flash sale site. Done. But more than anything, like even in the moments where I was like, I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone in the next 15 minutes, or how am I going to make this decision that I've never made before, or how am I going to be responsible to these investors that have invested in me? How am I going to take care of the awesome engineers who agreed to, quit really great jobs to like work on this commerce site? I think the things that held true for me in getting through even the most stressful times were back to great people. I had a great co-founder who was super calm and super positive, and any moments that I had of panic, he was like slow and steady and like, we're gonna get through this. So finding great people to surround yourself with. Learning, like anything that was challenging, if I flipped it around and thought about what am I learning from this, how can I apply what I just learned yesterday during a very stressful moment to today, that helped. And also seeing the possibilities of creating opportunities, that at the end of the day, we're all in control of creating our own opportunities. And even under duress, like if you take a moment, take a deep breath, and figure out where you want to head, oftentimes the opportunity will present itself. It may not look like what you thought it was going to be. It may come from out of the blue, but if you keep yourself open to it, some very interesting things will happen. So the path has its ups and downs, but like make sure you love the journey, because most of us, myself included, are going to be on that journey for a long time. So have fun. And then the last bit, there's no date on this. There's no turning point. Like it's the thing I've learned and that's helped me the most throughout my life and career, not just work but personal, is being kind. Sometimes I feel like in the valley or in business in general, or in sort of any industry that's stressful and high pressured and has lots of high performing people, nice is kind of a dirty word, right? I've gotten lots of feedback throughout my career. My development area, I'll get my like little feedback sheet, and usually on my development area is like, oh, you're too nice. Though Michael never told me that. So I still hold him up to be the gold standard. But lots of bosses I've had, especially during the 5 years I was at eBay when we were fast growth, would be like, your biggest development area is you're too nice. And I would be like, how is that a bad thing? Like, and now especially when I'm raising kids, right, the things that I tell them, like, and so I've shifted a little. So maybe nice has like a connotation that is weak or undesirable. And so I think of it as being kind, which is what I encourage my kids to do and what I look in the mirror every day and expect myself to do. And that really just means spending the time to really understand other people. That you can have a challenging moment at work, you can have a challenging moment in your personal life, and your reaction can be of frustration and impatience and, oh my God, why am I having this conversation again? Or why is somebody so fill in the blank? And I have found that taking a moment and being kind and realizing that person has a story, that person has something that happened in their day or in their life that's potentially bringing them to this point. That person also may have in their head, oh my God, if I have to have this conversation with Anne one more time, I'm going to freak out, right? So being open to the possibility that that other person that you're having a difficult moment with is just a person just like you. And that the times that I've extended and just been willing to be kind and given somebody the benefit of the doubt, delivered our hard message in a way that was truly empathetic, been open to being wrong about something, those have all paid back more than I can say. Like, they've created additional opportunities for me. There are people that probably I had, super difficult conversations and disagreements with when I was at eBay that now, like, I talk to all the time and that have referred me on to great people. And I think, like, the lesson, people will say, well, the valley's small, or, your career's long, like, you should do these things because of all these other reasons, right? I just say, like, be kind because it's like a renewable energy source. It's like the best thing that you can do, both to take care of yourself and take care of other people around you. It's probably, second to my kids, the source of energy that I really rely on to get through all the tough moments. So I've done a lot of talking. I would love to make sure I answered like questions or topics, or I'll dive in on anything I've shared, any of the companies I've worked at, any of the difficult conversations, whatever is most helpful for you. But that's my story to date. Still being penciled in. Anybody?
It seems like the majority of your background was within marketing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that was a very conscientious decision of yours to continue down the marketing path, or if you'd recommend kind of venturing off to other roles to make yourself a better, well-rounded candidate.
No, that's a great question. I don't think I talked specifically about role changes. I kind of have, maybe a different view on some of this. I looked at each opportunity a couple of different ways. One is, am I going to learn something from it? So I've moved, what you could consider laterally. Like, I was a product manager, I moved into marketing at eBay, I moved into international expansion. And each of those, well, partly it was a fast growth company, so there's lots of opportunities. And a lot of it was driven by like, oh, I want to learn something new. Like, this is an interesting area, and I'm going to take on something I haven't done before, and I'm just going to learn. And then the other two things that always matter to me, especially in leaving a company or going towards a new job, is, do I believe in the fundamentals of the business and the customer that business serves? And then, am I surrounding myself with really great people? So I've ended up in mostly like product and marketing, and now a combination of product and marketing roles, mostly because I really love customer experience and understanding customers. But I probably haven't been quite as deliberate of like, okay, it's these marketing roles, but it's been more like, am I going to learn something from it? Yeah.
Is there an archetype that you sort of resonate with?
Is there an archetype?
Do you have sort of symbols around you that remind you?
I don't know if this is exactly going to answer it. So, have any of you taken Myers-Briggs or any of the personality? So I'm an INFJ, which it basically means I should have been a therapist, and I missed my calling, and I'm now an unlicensed one and usually unpaid one in all the workplaces that I work. So for me, a lot of, and it may have come out in my story, a lot of how I make decisions and the people that resonate with me are around people and making decisions based on people. So I tend to gravitate, I think, towards, if you're asking about people that I gravitate towards or models I look at, are really people that are very people-centric, and that in conversation very quickly it becomes apparent that what drives them and where their values are around the impact that they have on the people around them. Does that, I don't know if I answered? Okay. Yeah.
How did you define your value moving from position to position?
How did I define my value? I think that I would definitely credit with how I was raised and my parents. Their expectation of me, and now my expectation of myself, and my expectation of my children, is that I show up and I do my absolute best, and that I figure out, I'm the one responsible for figuring out what it takes to be successful, how I'm going to contribute to the people around me, and the bar for myself is am I making my team better? Am I making the environment better? Am I making the business better? And that's really my internal metric. And so certainly if I've moved into positions where, and certainly with starting a company, like stuff I've never done before, I find that using that metric and that bar works, right? It's flexible enough to be applicable in any situation, because if you ask yourself that question, you generally can figure out what those things are, and you can certainly ask the people around you, which I do a lot with getting feedback, is like, am I doing a good job? Am I making a difference? And if I'm not, what are the things that I should be doing to do that?
I want to acknowledge how you own your successes and your failures and how you turn that into lessons, and I think that's truly inspirational. And I really appreciate that, that you're doing that, and also allowing us and everyone else in the audience to be able to write our own stories in that way too, of looking at some of the things that we may have not done well or right or whatever, of drawing lessons from that. So I think that's really inspirational, and I really appreciate that you're up there and that you are one of the amazing faces of feminine leadership in the Valley.
Thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you. Yeah, no, I gave up on perfection a long time ago. The backseat of my car has so many crushed Cheerios in it, parting together. Like, there's just stuff, like, people will ask me, oh, how do you do? You have 3 kids. My secret is my husband actually is a stay-at-home dad, so he's really the hero of the story. And the other is like, I was explaining to a couple of people before, like, with my first child, I was like, oh, I dropped the bottom 15%, and then it was like the bottom 20 once I had 2 kids, and now I think it's like the bottom 33%. Or like stuff that I used to expect myself to do that I don't do anymore, which includes happily living with a lot of dust bunnies in my house. That, I just embrace it. There's always dust bunnies and random pairs of mismatched socks. There's nothing, no system, no process, no amount of cajoling rewards that seems to get rid of the sheer number of mismatched socks in my house that are usually dirty as well. So, no, thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
So along those lines, Anne, speak to me about mother's guilt. How might that creep in?
Yeah. Mother's Guilt. I don't remember the book. It was actually a fiction book where it's about this working mom, and she signed up to bring like cupcakes or something or cookies to the school party, and she went out and like bought them at the grocery store and then brought them home, took them all out of the container, and then like beat them a little so they looked like they might be homemade, and then brought them into school. And I remember laughing so hard I was crying, because like if you look at how I've managed things from 1 to 3, I hope that my youngest never sees the stuff that I did for my oldest, which like sometimes I'm like, was this me? Like there are like themed birthday invitations and like goodie bags that I used to like hand stamp, and I'm like, who was that person? Because she doesn't live here anymore, and like and it's sort of maybe a good year if I actually have a party for the youngest, because we're like, your cousins are having a birthday party and there's a party, versus like the person. So mom's guilt. I think I've just, gone to a point, like, it's not to say I don't have it, right? I leave the kids every day, and the daily stuff that they're doing, sometimes I'm not totally on top of. What I have done though is figure out like the things that I can commit to, and that are things alone, and that I always do. So one thing with school volunteering, like it is just not feasible for me to be a room mom. Like, I'm sorry, I'm never gonna be a room mom. I probably am also not gonna bring the stuff that's like cookies or baked goods that are homemade. So I've reconciled myself with that. But what I do is like I volunteer for the art program at my kids' school. It's all parent-led, given like budget cuts in the state of California, but it's pretty flexible. Like I can pick the day, I teach the art lesson. It's usually once a month or once every 6 weeks. And I've done that for, my oldest is just graduated, graduated from 7th grade, and then my little one just finished kindergarten. So I've done that sort of kindergarten through 5th for all 3 kids. The other benefit of doing the same volunteer activity is the lessons, I can do like clown face, black and white silhouette, like in my sleep. So that's also a strategy, which is like pick one lane and like do it well and enjoy it. I do something with my kids every year, each one separately before school starts. Like I take them out, they get to pick the place they want to go to lunch, and we do like school shopping, and it's just sort of our day together. And I learned, it's just a commitment. It's something that we end up like looking forward to, and they all pick wildly different places, but they each get like a separate day for that milestone of going back to school. And I get to figure out and learn like what they're excited about, what they're nervous about, and then we have other sort of rituals like that. But there's definitely, I'm imperfect. This year, my one guilt thing was completely forgot to RSVP and take my daughter to a birthday party of one of her good friends. Because despite the fact that my husband has been at home since my oldest is 6 months old, I still get all the e-bites. Nobody ever puts them on an e-bite. So he's like, I don't know about it. I was like, it's in my inbox. So I still have many moments like that, but I try to pick ones that I commit to. Oh, we've got a couple of questions in the middle and then over here. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I'm curious, I guess, when you join a new company or starting a new role in, say, at eBay, like what are the kinds of things that you try to accomplish on your first day or in the first week, in the first month? Like, how did you make sure that, so say you were inheriting a team that was going to report to you, how did you, establish yourself within the group?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we have those transitions, we'll all have those transitions. I think for me it's been about like not going in with assumptions, especially, at eBay there were times where I was reorged into teams and like brought in above people, which is always like, that's hard for everybody, right? Change is hard in general. Even though we live in Silicon Valley and change is constant, like change is personally difficult for most people, myself included. And so trying to understand, again, like being empathetic, like what are people on the team going through? What do they feel like is going well, is not going well? What do they want in a new person on the team? It's not even like the new boss, right? It's really like, how can I add value? So being open to learning and figuring out where the things are, what are the things that are going well that I should really just let it keep on rocking and rolling, right? Nothing feels worse to people when you get a new boss or change of someone just up in your shorts about stuff where you're like, I have figured this out. I know how to do my job, right? And they're like, no, this is the way I do things. I have my system. And like, I just try to put myself in the position of like, how would I want to be treated? I have this conversation with my kids all the time. Is that how you want to be talked to? No. Then why are you talking to someone that way? So I try to take those lessons of like, be open to learning, and then, and then agree on like, what are goals that are going to be meaningful to a team, to the company that we all agree on, and then how are we collectively going to achieve those? But really staying open to being complementary, right, versus coming in with a specific set of things before learning. You had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you could speak to the process of raising a seed round for your startup and whether there are any obstacles you faced that might have been related to either being a woman founder or raising a company that had inventory and usable product.
I got all kinds of lessons learned and advice about raising money. And not all of them did I do. So you're going to raise a seed round. I would not raise from VCs if you can avoid it. I had 2 VCs. They're very great people, but VCs in a seed round are just, VCs have a way that they think about portfolio companies and think about investments. And even though they want to do more seed, they're just not always set up. This is not to say all VCs, but I think in general, like they're not in the mindset of like it's seed, and you're really just trying to figure out if there's a there there. And it also can make it complicated to raise money later. If for any reason there's partnership changes or dynamics and they don't participate or don't want to lead the next next round. Like, there's all kinds of complications. So if you can raise, and there's amazing angels and seed funds, I would say, like, raise from them. Their interests are much more aligned with yours as an entrepreneur. Other lessons learned. Your timeline matters zip to investors. Hate to break it to you. Like, the fact I spun something out, the people involved knew this. I had payroll. I quit my job. I had done a little bit of a convertible. I was trying to make sure the employees I had, hit payroll. They knew I was very transparent about all of this stuff. They had verbally agreed to fund. My timeline mattered nothing to them. The thing that, like, gets people across the finish line in funding is the pressure of other people who might swoop in and fund you. So a more direct way to say that is there's often a lemming mentality of, like, creating some amount of competition is good. It forces a decision. And so that, I inadvertently learned that in our tutorials. Like, I'm being super transparent about the timeline. I'm going to freak out if I miss payroll. Like, I'm going to have to, like, take money out of our own bank account and make sure these people are paid. And then, like, I had some side conversation where I'm like, oh, so-and-so called me, and they're potentially interested as well, so I'm trying to figure out how to, and it was like, check will be in the mail tomorrow, or wired, I was like, oh, was that all I had to do? So I would say, like, a healthy amount of competition. I do think the reality of being a woman raising money is, like, it's different because you don't look like everybody else that comes in, or there's more women now, which is awesome, but a couple of things, like, they're seeing 90%, 80 to 90% young men, or even, men who've done it several times. There's often not a woman partner. So just being, it shouldn't prevent you from doing it, but it's just a reality of the dynamic. And so I do, very honestly, what absolutely helped me is I had a great technical co-founder, because I don't code. And so that was tremendously helpful, not only for fundraising, but just because, like, doing any kind of startup as a founder is a pretty lonely process. So having somebody that's got your back is incredibly important. And it doesn't have to be a guy, it doesn't always have to be a coder, but just having a partner can also help in those fundraising situations. Yeah. So, yeah.
In what ways can a conflict be avoided by being kind? Like, how can, like, in stressful situations when there are conflicts, like, being kind is equivalent to being accommodating, so those two kind of are in conflict.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if everybody heard, like, how can being kind in a conflict situation or a confrontational situation actually work, and is being kind being accommodating? So I don't think so. I think you can remain kind but be firm. I actually think the most effective kind of direct, honest, feedback that I've given people when they haven't met expectations, when they're underperforming, or when they've done something that there's valid consequences to that we should discuss, that communicating that in a kind way actually can help them hear it better than if it feels like they're being punished, right? I genuinely believe that good people who mean well, who are trying to do their best at their job, actually want to hear what's not going well. But it's very hard for human beings to hear what we're not doing well and what our areas for growth are when it feels like we're being punished or criticized, right? When there's not an opening for a conversation. But I don't think it means being acquiescent, right? I think I found that in some of the most difficult situations and when there's disagreement or a super hard, maybe to be really concrete, at one of the startups I was at, we had to go from 30 people to 10, which is the hardest thing you do, when you're a leader in a startup. These are all people that, like, I looked in the eye and recruited them and, like, got them to quit day jobs. this was Insider Pages, which we ended up selling. So, part of figuring out who those people were was like a slightly conflict-ridden situation, right? Because like everybody had different ideas of who should stay and who should go and how we should handle it. And in that situation, I think, being direct and yet being kind, both in the decision process as well as in the delivery of the message, turned out to be, absolutely a way that I felt like I handled it well as the fact, and the way that I know that it's hard in this situation is like all these people that we, parted ways with and had to lay off, like I still am in touch with, right? And to this day, like, when we talk or if it comes up, like how it was handled was so much more important to people than the actual thing that happened. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I have sort of a follow-up to that, which is, well, how do you ask for feedback without coming across as mean?
Yeah. How do you ask for feedback without coming off as needy? Like, give me feedback, I want feedback. I find I ask it in different ways. Like I think in general my philosophy around feedback is it's most effective if it's delivered in a timely manner, while the situation is fresh, right? And that also makes it easier to give and receive feedback on like smaller chunks that we can digest, right? Like nothing is worse than getting into a performance review or whatever, a meeting, it doesn't have to be a performance review, and for somebody to be like, okay, so here's the 16 things that I wish you would do better, right? And they like roll, and you're like, oh my God, like I am clearly not doing well. And I've seen these situations before. So I believe like we can only hold so many things in our head at once. Could be because I have 3 kids. But so I think like feedback makes sense when it's timely. So I think I end up getting feedback because I demonstrate giving feedback. So I'll do things with my team where right after a meeting or presentation, I'll just say, hey, do you have like a couple minutes? I just want to run through, like, and I always do like, here's 3 things that I thought you did awesome. Because there's usually always 3 things that somebody did really well, including just having the courage to do a presentation sometimes, right? And then here's 2 things that like I would love to see you work on. And more often than not, people are like, oh yeah, that was on my list. Oh yeah, I felt like I could have done that better. And like they already have that. Like most people that are slightly self-aware, do that. So by doing that, it's easier for me to ask for it without seeming needy, which is like after a meeting, even if it's like a weekly team meeting or an email that I sent or some project that we're doing, I'll ask my team like, what are a couple things I could have done better? And usually what they provide is pretty close to how I evaluate myself. That help? Okay. Other questions? Well, I know some people said they came to network, so I want to make sure you guys have time to talk to each other because it's a great group. But thank you for sharing your time with me. I really, really appreciate it.